Alrighty, we have just ticked over to 4 o'clock. Before we hand over to Mike and Andrew, I am just gonna pass over to Caroline Williams, who's our publisher, who's gonna get started with a bit of a welcome for us all. Thank you, everybody.
Hi everyone, helps to be off mute. Just wanted to welcome you all to the second of our webinar series for Nelson Design for QCE Units 3 and 4, the Year 12 book, following the Year 11 book that we published last year. So just to begin with, I wanted to begin with an acknowledgement of country. In the spirit of reconciliation, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respect to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples today. Thank you. And just some little housekeeping. So this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be sent out next week to everyone who's registered. There is a Q&A at the end of the session. So please, if you've got any questions that come up, I know Andrew and Mike in particular really love that sort of interaction and really at the heart of what they've been working on for the last more than 2 years is really to try and provide as much support to you as teachers and to your students as possible. So they really do kind of crave that interaction. So don't hold back. Please feel free to ask any questions. The best place is in the Q&A. Is that right, Susanna? The Q&A rather than chat?
Look, either or will be fine for tonight, I think.
We'll keep an eye on both. So you receive your chosen resource upon publication. So if you've chosen the Year 11 or the Year 12 book, and really encourage you to contact the email on the screen there if you've got any questions past the event. So we'll do our best to cover all of the questions, but if there are any that we run out of time, please be reassured that we will follow up afterwards with you directly. So anyway, moving straight on, it's my honor really to introduce Andrew Scott and Mike King today. Yeah, I can't speak more highly of the two of them, the work that they've done over the last 2 years. What we had was a first edition, which many of you will know was a Victorian book that had been adapted for the QCE when it first came out. So when I came up to the new edition, there was a new syllabus, the question of what we needed to do for this. And I spoke to many teachers, and if any of you are here, thank you very much for your feedback. We really did take that on board. And the result I hope you'll find is 2 very different books than that first edition. So we took what you really loved, and there were some things that you really valued about that first edition. But what this really evolved into, after recruiting Mike and Andrew, has turned into a much more tailored and really something that I'm really proud of. And hopefully that comes through when even if you've seen page proofs of the Year 12 book, you'll get the sense of just how much work has gone into not only the print book, but also Nelson Mindtap. So Andrew and Mike have been doing a lot of work around the resources to help you teach, to help your students. So I really, in all my years of publishing, this has been really an extraordinary experience working with the two of them. So I can't, as I said, speak more highly of them. So I'm sure this passion and everything that they've put into it will come through again in this webinar as it always does. So that's enough for me. Over to you, Andrew and Mike. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Caroline, and welcome to everyone. I'm just going to start because we start this in the last webinar as well. We are not the QCAA. We love them. We think they're great. We think Roy does a terrific job. But it's really important for assessment for there to be a single source of truth, and for us to come wading in and suggesting that we're trying to give opinion that is close to fact as to where the line is drawn on assessment, for example, and that's not our role. But we have tried to honour, I think that's the word, honour the syllabus as best we can and support it in the ways that we've looked at. Andy, did you want to say anything?
No, I absolutely agree.
Just hello. Sounds good.
Yeah, hello.
We've got a schedule for this next hour, and we're trying to put a lot of time at the end there for questions and answers. We did have a few in the last one on Unit 3 on AI, so there is opportunity for us to look at the impact of AI and our findings and share those with you. and we're happy to do so. But if that's not something that comes up in the chat, then we won't delve into that. We've got some other stuff that we can respond to you with. But I'm going to be talking about sustainable design opportunities and helping students finding them, and the gap in the market. I think it's probably been my biggest challenge with Unit 4 is getting students through the explore phase more so than the developing and the devising. And Andrew's going to talk about the exam preparation, and I say the exam preparation and how that might be useful for you going forward. Let's kind of delve in. We've got sustainable design in. We've got. Sorry, Andrew. Do we want to introduce the votes on the topics today?
No, I think we found it was a bit hard to juggle
Okay.
Menti and the Q&A in Teams, so let's not worry about it.
Thanks, Andrew. But do put inside that chat if there's something in particular you wanted to cover later on. We'll try our best to get there. Within the Nelson Mindtap space is a teacher plan, and it is come from my understanding of how I might go about it, and it's within the understanding of how my school kind of runs. And there's a little bit of a liberty taken in the way that we can describe teacher time and class time, to give project time perhaps a little bit longer. And again, it's not something that comes from the point of QCA. It's my observations. But in that space, you will see lots of links and references to the pages and to the Nelson Mindtaps spaces that you can use. And I would suggest it's an exhaustive list. So I wouldn't expect every teacher to pick up all and every resource and use all of them. You probably won't find time, but they are just suggestions about which ones probably connect best to the content as you go through it. The content itself is really driven from the syllabus, and how I might go about planning that in the best possible way. But sustainable design opportunities, and that's this kind of this explore diamond. I wanted to talk about in relation to IA3 because it's the one that the students really struggle to find that design opportunity the most. We've got QCA driving the idea of really open-ended tasks. So we've got sometimes you'll have a demographic to target, and that might be all that you're looking at, and just the word redesign. So we're looking for redesign opportunities. We've got an age group of people to approach as our stakeholders, and then not much else. And students find that a little bit overwhelming. So I've found the best thing to do is to really introduce in terms of the social, economic, and ecological parts of the sustainable approach, and that's that 3 pillars that we're kind of given in the syllabus. There is a 4 pillar, there is a 5 pillar, and we go into that in the book. But the 3 that we're encouraged to lean on are those 3 there. And that's just in terms of giving students lots and lots of examples of here's a product, or here's an architectural space that's really well designed for social. Perhaps it's a library face with a series of connecting spaces, or perhaps it's a social media app that's obviously incredibly connecting in social. And then I might do the same with ecological and economic, and trying to offer some really great social, economic, ecological designs in practice, and how they've been really successful. The economic, I find, it's really important to introduce some of the circular economy apps, where people are trading in what is essentially waste, and trying to encourage people to reuse. So I think there's some of those examples, or some examples in the case study in the book in chapter 12 are worth delving into to get a little of those opportunities. When we look just at ecological, I always encourage students to look at all of these areas, whether it's energy consumption, material choice. Some of these lend brilliantly to product design, not so, let's say, to digital media outcomes. And LCA in particular is an area that I've always kind of introduced. I understand that life cycle analysis is not everyone's cup of tea, but life cycle analysis is a very complicated space, and I think I start by talking about some simple examples for students and looking at the impact, but encourage them not to go down that rabbit hole too deeply. And the reason being, it's an incredibly complex space for a student in a school to start looking at a particular product and unpack every part of that life cycle analysis can be very difficult and a bit daunting. Within the social, there's a series of spaces. Now, these are introduced in the book as well. And there's a series of opportunities, and sometimes simply just kind of introducing these terms as in health and well-being and talking about opportunities for students to look at that might inspire them to start looking at some analysis opportunities and seeing what's out there in that space. And last one, economic. And I kind of come back to that point of, if I can make a fantastic product, but I make it out of gold-plated diamond, it's never really going to run and make it into the market. I could make a pair of headphones that are gold-plated and they cost you $20,000, and it's never going to be feasible for that to make money or recoup money. And kind of that really simple terminology tends to resonate with students, and then bring it back to looking at every products that are sometimes very successful but ultimately fail on economics. And one of those examples is actually in the case studies within the book, which is Zero Co. Zero Co brought out some plastics, some beach plastics that had been refined into cosmetic bottles and bottle tops. But sadly has just recently failed. It's just about to close its revenue source because it hasn't been able to make that last. Another example, I might get Andrew to talk about this one because he's across it a little bit more, is the Mogclave.
Sure. Isaac was one of my students, QT, in his final year, and this was his project where he looked at how in small medical practices, doctors, when they treat a wound, they open a pack of scissors and tweezers and so on, and those are disposable tools. They're steel tools, but at the end of a single use, and there might be 3 tools in a packet, doctor might only use a single tool. But all of them go into the waste stream as soon as the patient has left the room. And so Isaac looked at, would there be a way of returning to the old practices of using an autoclave without making it too costly for a small practice to actually, the labor cost essentially. And so he developed this modular design where essentially the stuff after it's been used, he gets put it back in the container, and then it'll be put in the autoclave by support staff who can, and the markers on the outside, the legend on the control tells you if it's sterile or not. And so the idea was to make it more sustainable while keeping it economical. So yeah, that's the idea. Nice work that he did. He got the DIA Graduate of the Year award for that. So it's recognised as a good design.
Thanks, Andrew. It's a fabulous example. Despite introducing a lot of these examples, and we've just mentioned a couple there, I found students really struggle because they get introduced to the unit, to this term gap in the market. Now we see it in Unit 2, but here it is again, this idea of gap in the market. I have to introduce it and talk about gaps in the market, and then they get really excited about entrepreneurial opportunities and thinking, oh, well, I'll think of something that no one else has thought of before. Then I find students kind of are looking for redesign. So they start to think, oh, I've got to tick off social, I've got to tick off economic, it's got to be ecological, and it's got to be a gap in the market. So we get a lot of students kind of taking this bullseye approach, and I think this Venn diagram hopefully makes sense, is when you take those 4 potential opportunities and then try and squeeze down just to one design that's going to meet all 4, it's incredibly small targeting, and it leads to students getting really lost in trying to find that one. So they're kind of they're dismissing so many potential ideas by assuming, oh, well, it doesn't have the gap in the market, or it's not social, it only does the economic, it doesn't do the ecological. And I think this diagram kind of recognizes, or what we're trying to aim for students to do is really just hitting one potential category is absolutely fantastic. And you may find down the redevelopment road, you might come up with one idea and it might spurn into 5, 6, 7, and you might find down the development road that actually it's really easy to bring it across to economical and cultural and social as we move forward through the design process. And it's not an uncommon problem as far as I'm aware in a lot of classes is teachers are struggling to kind of get that starting point. So my advice, my takeaway would be continue to offer as many opportunities for students to look at analysing what's already out there. And of course, doing it with that word limit that we know is, so we're encouraging kids to get really concise and really tight on the amount of words that they're exploring and they're exploring those redesign opportunities. And then be really comfortable just to be approaching one of those many opportunities that we've got. So if it's just responding to social, if it's just responding to economic or ecological, then they're really ticking that box. And if they happen to start looking and exploring what the stakeholder might want, perhaps that's when they get into that gap in the market space and start thinking about what doesn't quite exist there at the moment, rather than trying to a lot of students kind of trying to leap to that invention space, which is really difficult. Documenting, I'm really happy to see, and in this syllabus, I think it's so important that students just show their thought process, and I've had many students kind of say, well, I can't use those pages now. I've just explored and realized that there's all sorts of spaces already in that space. I've looked at timber recycling perhaps, and I've found timber's recycling is really covered. We've got sawmills that already do lots of different things in that space. We've got reclamation spaces. I just don't think there's anything for me to explore there that's not already taken, and they're not prepared to put the evidence down. And I'd take the opposite approach, is you're simply showing your thinking and approach that you explored something, you've struggled to see where it might go, and you've decided to go in a different direction. And the other side of my conversations with them is we're really trying to get to a design brief. We're not necessarily trying to jump over and start looking at what's the devising look like. It is nice to have an idea in mind. It is nice to kind of being able to, but if we don't trust the process and recognize that our job is to find the problem first, then we're always going to dismiss the devising because we've already assumed that we can't think of anything. And I guess I come back to that statement of trust the process, trust the design process. We've done it before. We've done it in 2 other projects, or 3, 3 at this stage, the 2 in year 11 and 1 before this one. And it's been successful, we hope. And they're going to have to just formulate a problem before they jump ahead and decide, okay, where it might go. Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, I think that whole trust the process thing is so important. I think it's very natural. It's human nature, and it's certainly student human nature to want to minimize the risk of starting something you don't know how to finish. And so it's natural to have a solution in your back pocket right at the start and then kind of work backwards to it. But you really want to diffuse that anxiety as much as possible and get people to trust the process. I often think if you know the solution at the start, you don't really need a designer. You know, the design problem is solved. So yeah, it doesn't give you much option to do something interesting if you already know the answer. Yeah, I think that's a tricky thing with students.
Thanks, Andrew. And we're very happy to take any questions on that and that particular approach. A lot of that's within I think that one's chapter 10, I believe it is. And so if there's any detail I've missed, I'm sure I have, but hopefully it's covered in that space as well. And if there are any questions on how you might go about it, or you wanted to add and share with the group, that sounds great as well. I might just hand over to Andrew now. We're looking at exam preparation.
Thank you. Yeah, exam prep. Exam's quite a challenging kind of topic to do in design, because you spend in most design projects they take a lot longer. You know, they go for weeks and often months, and in the real world, years. And so suddenly doing something, doing design actions in a very short amount of time is quite challenging. And yeah, it's a tricky thing for students to adapt to. So preparing them for that very important type of assessment is something that I think there's a lot we can do. One of the things that we write about in the book is making sure that students know that they're not going to get any marks in their exam work by doing anything in the Explore diamond. So they need to focus on the develop work. Otherwise, you know, they're not going to do very well. So preparing students, helping them go into that exam feeling like they're as ready as they can be, I think is a really helpful thing you can do for them. So various things include marking your own work, you know, going through, trying to look at an exam from the point of view of being a marker as opposed to being a student is an interesting strategy. Having an exam kit, a set of equipment that you know how to use, I think is really helpful. So I think the last thing a student should do is go into an exam with a set of new color pencils they never used before, or an untested pen, or you know, or a pencil that apparently they dropped it sometime and all the lead's broken. Well, that's not the kind of stuff you want to find in the exam. So you want to have all your kit ready, and you know how to use it. You get your own kind of trusted equipment, and that's what you use in the exam. So rehearsing that kind of stuff ahead of time is really helpful. And then having an exam plan, a way of knowing how to address the objectives of the exam, and being able to uh, have a plan for how much time you'll spend on each part of that, I think is really helpful. So in advance of that stuff you might do quite close to the exam, but before that, you might do some exercises, and you can think of it as being in training, like an athlete being getting into a state of being match fit, and all that stuff about maybe even making up your own exam, which is pretty high level challenge, because it really gets you into the mind of an assessor. Preparing an exam to actually create an exam, you need to know what the assessment criteria are. So that's quite a challenging thing. There are some activities that we introduced in the first book, which are to do with exercises that take place in the class, which are quite accelerated timeframes, design exercises that can take place entirely in the span of one class. And those are good exercises to run in class leading up to an exam, because they get people to work in a much quicker way. And most of them are going to be much more accelerated than the exam. So if a student feels comfortable doing the concept bomb or the rapid iteration exercise, then the exam running for 2 hours plus is going to feel relatively luxurious. So those kind of exercises that help kind of practice thinking quickly and sketching quickly can help students feel a little bit more prepared.
No problem. We're on slide 20, Andrew.
Okay, I might just okay, I'm just going to open the file on my screen so I can see what I'm talking about. Can you change it for me?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that's really weird. It just
26,
says
sorry,
this service is
26.
temporarily unavailable. Fantastic.
Slide 26, getting match fit, which is
Okay.
to be something my students generally enjoy. We always tend to run on a timer in the classroom up on the screen, and it's just that way of encouraging those that really want to dawdle and take too long, just to get that little bit quicker and enjoy it and have fun, we hope.
The exam guide is something we drew up to try and have a kind of visual summary of what's happening in the exam. So it's basically a single page summary of the amount of time, the activities that take place during the exam, and basically a concise summary of the different assessment objectives. Yeah, so this the idea is that it's in the book, but you can also download an A4 version, print it out, and that might be something students could take home and read through, analyze, or maybe discuss in class, and a way of kind of getting their head around what to do. I always used to do this for my students when it came to assessment. You could give them a voluminous document with lots of details, but if you drew a picture of it, they seem to be able to fasten onto and understand things a little bit better. So I guess design students tend to be quite visual in how they take in information. Well, the next couple of slides, I'll just talk about the samples of student work from syllabus 1.0. One of the things that caused quite a lot of concern and discussion with syllabus 1.1 is the word limit for the exams. And people were like, put it politely, WTF. And at the various data conferences, that was people saying, what's going on? What's going on? And a bit of discussion with QCEE. They felt, I think, that people were, especially in the exam, students were just writing too much instead of sketching. And so we believe that the word count is an attempt to kind of get the balance back towards sketching, like visual designing rather than writing. So our biggest advice when it comes to syllabus 1.1 and certainly the exams is to encourage students to show it rather than describe it. So the work should be overwhelmingly visual, and any text, any notation, any labels should be as brief as possible. So in other words, the examples that we were going to show you were very successful examples from the previous version of the syllabus, which when you have a look, are small images with lots and lots of text crowded around them. And we think that whereas that might have done well previously, it's probably not going to do so well in this version, this iteration of the syllabus. So there are some good examples of prior student work where their images are nice and large. But in general, they tend to be quite text heavy. So we're going to be talking about, so I think that's a nice, those images are nice and big, but the amount of text, oh, wow. But like I said, these did well previously, but we suspect that they're probably not going to do so well next from now on. So you need to try and, if you go to the next one, there's another one with the devising heading. So I think this is a pretty good example. It's got bullet point text. The images are quite large, although they could obviously be bolder and easier to see from a distance. But I think this is getting the balance right for syllabus 1.1. The next slide is my suggestion for what I would encourage the same student to do to try and reduce the amount of text. So this one, instead of sort of brief sentence fragments, to go even briefer and summarize those things as concisely as possible. So that's just a suggestion for what I think might work. Could you go to the next slide as well as just a
Andrew,
slight
can I
iteration?
give
Please.
this set of designs some context? So this student
Yes,
took
please.
on the river stage, and it was an experience that she was able to tap into from lots of different forums and people, and that's it's just around the river mouth, and
It's good work.
and she was just looking at the consistency in people saying, when it's wet, it's pretty horrible. When it's wet, it's just not the same event, etc., etc. So she looked at all of the things that she unpacked there. And although you're right that she did very well this time round on this syllabus in the current version, we're not going to see any kind of success. She's going to hit word limit after about 4 pages. She's just not going to get anywhere near to the end if she carried on in that way. So, and she didn't have those restrictions. And so this kind of movement towards kind of one of the simplest things I encourage my students to do right now in year 11 is stick a question mark on the end. If you stick a question mark on the end of something, it starts to suggest you're giving it thought. It's arguably it's critical because we're asking questions of what's in front of us, whether it's our own idea or analysis, and there's no words. It's just one question mark, so it's not even contributing to your word count. So maintenance question mark suddenly becomes a critical statement rather than a one that's just, it gets introduced as a negative in all the words that you see there. Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Next slide, please. This one has nice big images. I think, again, this is from the previous iteration of the syllabus, but I think it's closer to what they're looking for now. And really, you don't want to have the situation. You really don't want to have students counting words in an exam. You want them to be comfortable with being thinking and communicating visually, and using brief text, a few words to help draw your attention to what you're looking at, rather than talking about it at length. Next slide, please. So this was I recorded a video of what I might do if I was using my exam time, and this was a sketch for a hypothetical luggage design thing. So trying to get that those notes, that text as brief as possible, and using as fast and quick form of sketching with just a couple of pens to try and use the time productively and visually. Yeah. So that's mainly what we have in terms of exam prep. So sort of rehearsal, preparation ahead of time, and then encouraging people to be as visual, and turning down the text dial as far as they can go. But I think we're going into, we've gone through most of our slides, and we're happy to address your questions and focus in on the kind of themes that you are most interested in now. So do we have anything in the chat?
There's nothing there at the moment.
We do have some slides prepared on the AI question that came up. We didn't have time to deal with it in the last webinar. We could go straight into that, but it would be good to make sure it's what you want us to be talking about.
Yeah, I'm very happy to look at that. But again, I just one hand up to say you're there and you're alive and breathing, or that you'd like to talk about AI and how it's affecting or impacting and being used. I'm really happy to go on and chat about that and share my findings. And Andrew's got so I think we might hopefully see someone confirm that they'd be interested. There you go. Stephen's put his hand
Signs
up.
of life.
Yeah. Social sustainability would be something that we'd like to come back to or have a look at from Nikki. That's one from Nikki, Andrew. Social sustainability activities. That's a great question, because sometimes it's a tricky area to find obvious and easy examples to connect to.
When we talk about sustainability, we do very readily go to ecological, don't we? And it takes a little bit of thinking to switch that track to something that works in a cultural, social context.
Yeah, I try and connect to things in relation to social, which is a cultural movement. Is all of our year 12s all go to formal, so they've all got a formal, and they all dress up for the formal. They go to that event, and then I have seen students go down that road and start talking about formal outfits. They love doing that. They love talking about that for many hours and not doing any work in design lessons, and they'll talk about their dresses, and then they finally started to latch onto something when we talked about it, about the cost of it. And then I had 2 or 3 students over the last couple of years have all looked at trying to move away from a single-use fashion design item, single-use formal dress, and using that as an example to leverage on as a sample of how you could go about that kind of problem. That's one that kind of connects really well because it's so relevant to them, and they've got that connection with that being their culture. It's a culture for year 12. It's a rite of passage, so it connects through. It's one of many. I think the social sustainable housing case study that we have, it's not sorry, the shared housing, not the sustainable housing, is probably quite a good example as well, Andrew.
Yeah, I think when it comes to addressing social sustainability, it's about designing ways of changing attitudes, I think. If you want to move a community or a group of stakeholders from one state to a different state, a more sustainable state, then doing things that promote other ways of thinking and other attitudes. Um, so how can we make? I mean, look at another. I guess advertising is a classic example of changing attitudes in terms of public service announcements. So probably the most famous one I can think of is the Slip Slop Slap campaign, which has been going for 20, 30 years, and is just become an intrinsic kind of cultural reference in Australia. When I was young, it was the norm. I can't remember the slogan now, but the trying to get off the couch and get moving. Can't remember it what it was now. But the cartoon character, and that was about changing culture, I guess. So I think maybe a social sustainability is about what designers can do to life be in it. Thank you. What designers can do to move a group of people to a more beneficial way of behaving. Yeah, that's right.
We've got a question. I think this is a quick one. Francis, coming in across from New Zealand. Is colour required? I can answer this one. This is for exams. I would assume that colour is actually referenced in the previous marking guides. So that was certainly the 2024 one. I think the 2023 in relation to communication, representation and communication, we saw the word, so tone was there, shadow, I think, was there, and certainly color was there. So the use of those, and then some quantifying qualitative words like, sophisticated. And so, yes, color is expected to be added, not necessarily every page, but I would imagine by the time you get closer to your final proposal, students would be using color. We've got.
Yeah, I mean, I think color should always be subordinate to the design. It should be, you wouldn't put a very colorful, lots of colors into a sketch just because you think it's necessary. If the design is actually monochromatic, then that would be counterproductive. So, but yeah, color to communicate design intent, I think is pretty important.
Students with lower sketch skills, have we got some tips or any suggestions on how to get them started?
I could talk endlessly about this topic. I find it really interesting. I've taught sketching to design students for many, many years, and I learned many painful lessons. But the number one thing is you want to get people to keep practicing, and you want to try and decouple cultural. We talk about this in book one. Try and get people to not see sketching as the art, because we're generally raised that drawing is something that an artist does, and artists create beautiful work, and that's counterproductive for design because it leads you down a track of laboring your drawings, making them too elaborate, and also censoring yourself. That's not good enough. I can't do this, all that kind of stuff. So you end up short circuit, talking yourself out of being a designer because you can't draw well enough. So it's pretty common for most people to think, I can't draw well enough. Can I fake it and get through? One really, in a design context, as a teacher, you want to be saying, hey, lots of designers can't draw very well. They're not artists. It's about thinking visually. It's about using drawing as a tool to think, because it helps you think through complex designs. You don't have to hold it in your head. You can start building it on the paper. In a sense, a sketch is a form of prototyping in that you're actually drawing it so that you can judge it and evaluate it and improve it. So if you can encourage them to think about the kind of back of the napkin style drawing rather than the drawing for beauty and the drawing for art. It's not going to be stuck up on the wall and framed. It's going to be drawn all over by your teacher and other students in the process of using that sketch to get to a better design. So I think encourage them not to think of their sketches as beautiful, but as useful. The utility of sketching, not the artistic aesthetic of sketching. I think that's a good strategy to encourage. Many people I studied with pretty mediocre sketching, and I remember one of my the guy I went through uni with. I remember interviewing him for a design podcast years later. Him saying, my sketching hasn't improved that much, but I use it all the time because we're in a video chat with the factory in China, and we're doing diagrams to help bridge the language barrier. You know, we're sketching, and yeah, it's really important. So it's not about beauty, about utility.
Thanks,
Hope that
Andrew.
helps.
It certainly does for me. We are gonna have a look at AI now. If we can go to those slides, that'd be great. There is a lot to say. We have 15 minutes to do it. I might just start by going through some of the examples that I saw. It's more of a storyboard. Can we click through down some of these slides?
Mike put up some
we'll start
examples.
this. This is the story of 2024. AI's really getting really exciting. ChatGPT is free and kids love words, and they're an unlimited word count. And I started to see stuff like this. And I started to see a lot of this stuff. And I used to know it was ChatGPT because it had a lot of Z's in it. And it was an Americanized English, and they were too lazy to take the Z's out. And what I think was the worry was I was really keen to say, this is a great tool. We can still use it. It's fun. But then I would run into the odd lazy student that really just wanted to use it to create their ideas for them. I think the positive here is we're not going to see this greatly this syllabus because the word count's going to kill it off. I still think it's a nice launch pad for kids to start looking at and go, oh, that's a nice idea. That's an interesting way of doing it. Perhaps to refine prompts and get better suggestions going forward. I really worry that it takes away that creativity side of things. But that's a lot of what I did see. Are we all right to skip to the next one? My recent, this is one that came through, and I wondered how I can mark this one because it was very recent. And I know that's what a lot of teachers look at this stuff and go, well, how do I put a grade on it? Because they're using an AI model. Now, in this case, obviously, students have been encouraged to reference. I think she's referenced that she's got this, or it's created by Canva. And the problem is not in one of those cases was a sketch provided before it. So there's no ideation to create that prompt. It's a text to image prompt. And the problem I have there is the term originality. And I might skip on to the next one as well. I'm not giving you an answer on that one. I'm giving you experiences, but we'll try and come back to answers. So one of the terms in the ISMG is discerning refinement. Now we had to the right there, you've got a sketch that a student uploaded to an AI tool, and I think it might have been Newark, which is a nice tool. And they would have given it a little bit of a prompt. So they have gone text. So it's image to image, which is great. And they're getting a fantastically refined space, and it's excellent. I would assume that the prompt, they didn't provide me the prompt, which I have come back to them on since. And the prompt must have been talked about having a shopping list and using a phone at the same time. So it's a really smart upgrade, except for the time when I actually spoke to the student and said, what are these mysterious black holes? And no answer was given. Now, one of the problems I have there is if no answer is given, we've got no annotation to suggest what these mysterious black holes are. We've got not a glitch, but the tool has done something in addition, but without being prompted. And again, it's kind of that question of, is this discerning refinement? If there's no evidence that there's nothing to support it, I think that's where I come back to making a point that I can't reward students against the ISMG given. So one of the terms is discerning refinement. Another one's it relates to originality, so original ideas. And I think what's the next slide got for me? Yeah, so they're the kind of experiences that I'm sure others might be experiencing as well. And I keep coming back to that ISMG, and in particular, those words like innovation is there as well. So it's innovative. The innovation needs to be coming from the student, and if the innovation is coming back from the tool, and not necessarily connected to the student's work, that's where we can't reward. And I'm spending less of my time and not so interested in chasing down every opportunity to chase up someone for plagiarism. My focus is, are we using it well? Are we prompting it? Are we showing the prompts if that's appropriate, depending on the guidelines for the school, where we have used it and referencing those, and then ensuring it's being used. What I would say, well, is in that refinement stage in particular, rather than in trying to devising ideas off the back of it.
To me, it's a non-problem in the context of a design sketchbook. I think, this might be my university teaching mentality or context, and I don't know how well this translates to the school setting, but I believe that when you can see every page from the design process in the sketchbook, you can flick through it, you can see how people work through the design problem. And this is something at QT, we would never assess just the proposal, the design proposal at the end, without also looking at the process. And that involved looking at every page of the sketchbook very, very quickly, not reading anything, just skipping through. You get that kind of gestalt impression of how the idea, the different areas that were explored, how much depth was the students went into things. Now, in that context, it's very easy to see if something's been plagiarized. So the plagiarism I used to be looking for was someone just took a design off the internet, and you'd see it in the sketchbook where they have a few rough sketches, and then bam, finished design lands in the middle with no history, no development, no refinement, just really obvious. Now, I think the same thing is going to happen if you've gone to an AI, you've put in a prompt, or even a crude sketch, and then bam, if that's the final design, it's completely catastrophic. It's useless. What it can be a useful tool for generating some alternatives to explore, but then you want to sketch, you want to say, oh, that's an interesting idea, I never would have thought of that. Then you trace it and you sketch it and develop it some more. Maybe put your development, your sketches back into the AI and say, this is closer to what I'm looking for. Render it for me. And that kind of back and forth exploration, which is all visible in the sketchbook, that's a designer using AI as a tool, not as basically a tool to just plagiarize the whole thinking process. There's no thinking in it then. So yeah, I think being able to see having rigor in the process, that's what we would look for at uni. Does that work in high school, Mike? Does that work to expect students to show all their working, to show all their sketches that led up to that stage? I think you're muted, Mike.
Yeah, sorry, I was saying something amazing as well. No, it does. I think it works really well. I think as a teacher, because you sometimes will get challenged at different levels, we just come back to, right, which part of the ISMG am I going to hang on to make sure that it's there? And even when you just look at the devising ISMG, you've got terms like credible. So if we look at and want to reward credible, we would have to see that there's evidence to support that that's the student's work. We've got originality, and we've got detailed attributes. You can get detailed attributes from an AI tool, but originality, I think, would have to be proven by being able to see some sort of sketches coming through. And you're right in that you would expect to see multiple ideas devised from different points of view, and that coming in and coming together. And then in the other spaces, evaluating and proposing, we've got discerning refinements of ideas based on evaluation and stakeholders' feedback. If it's just driven by an AI model, we won't have that evidence. We won't have anyone touching base with stakeholders. We won't have that full circle of design happening, because it's simply one person prompting, so the evidence probably wouldn't be there. I think it's right. I think the sketchbook expectation for the visual representations will drive that. So hopefully it will. I suspect we might still encumber some issues, and I'm sure people might have some questions. We've got one here. So
can I just on that,
yeah,
the question that's come up in the chat,
yeah,
could we
yeah.
skip to slide 44, go back about 5 slides? There's a slide with photographs on the right-hand side, this one. So these are various AI tools. The only one I'm really familiar with is Viscom AI, because it's an industrial design tool. But I would encourage you to have a look at how designers use AI. It's a great example of a collaborative process. From the point of view, is it okay for to use AI to render your design proposal? I'd say with sufficient work, and if you go to viscom.ai and have a look at some case studies and examples, you see it's not a couple of sketches and bam, there it is. It's numerous. They use a sketchbook interface where you iterate, refine, and it's kind of like the AI is your idiot intern and you're saying, "Oh, change this, change that," and they do it for you. I think we're heading to the point where rapid, quick, informal sketching is not going away. It's as powerful as it ever been, but the need to be able to render very polished renderings is becoming less and less important, because you can get the AI to do the photorealistic rendering for you, as long as you don't just give it a few orders and walk away and expect it to be finished. You've got to really coax it. You got to really work it out of them. It's like I said, like, think of it as like a talented but stupid intern that doesn't really know what they're doing. They need a lot of direction. And I think if you use it in that way, then you're going to get good results out of it. But if you don't expect it to do any thinking.
I think if we think back to when we just had CAD and we had Fusion, we'd have no questions with a student using Fusion or Adobe Illustrator or Adobe Photoshop to create an image that was rendered. We'd expect them to be able to learn the tool, etc., and they might have to invest a few hours in watching videos and supporting their way through it. Now we've simply got a better tool at doing that process. It's just how far we lean on it to create the ideas for us. And I think that's a great example of kind of a positive use of how we might create a render. And that's the really exciting thing, particularly for students that would have struggled previously with some of those CAD products and their complexity.
Yeah, it's an interesting tool, and you've really got you've really got to learn how to do it. Yeah, I think if there's a slide, I've got a quote that's a couple of slides earlier. It's my favorite quote. I use this all the time. It's a Marshall McLuhan quote from 1969. The future masters technology will have to be lighthearted and intelligent. The machine easily master the dumb and the grim. I think AI will definitely master the grim. People who will just take what they're given by it. You've got to really play with it and use it intelligently to get good results out of it. So in a way, it reveals the lazy ones because they don't have any process. They stopped at the first superficially attractive image instead of having to work it until it's right. Anyway, but I'm no expert on AI.
We've got we've got a minute, so I thought I might do a final call for questions. In that time, I just want to thank Andrew and Mike for running us through a brilliant presentation. But please, if you've got anything final while Andrew and Mike are online, please feel free to ask any final questions. I will also
Love
check
to engage with you any way we can.
I've got
Thanks
the
so
link.
much, everyone.
I also popped the link from the housekeeping slide in the chat. You might have to scroll up right to the top. So if you do think of anything that comes up after this session, please feel free to send it to us there, and then I can flick it on to Andrew or Mike, so that way if you do have any questions that come up, you'll be able to get an answer. So we might give it another minute, but in that, thank you everyone again for joining us. We hope you have such a lovely evening, and the recording again will be out within the week along with the slides. So if there's anything you do miss or you want to catch up on, you'll be able to do so then. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.